and co-founder. He is unfortunately without power or internet. So we had to pivot, and NATO has graciously agreed to step in and is well prepared and ready to take on this topic today. So we're very lucky to have him. Is unfortunately with... All right. Here we go. Can everyone see my screen?
Looking good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for hopping on and taking the time to learn a little bit more about how to use your SIEM as a business enabler. My name is Erica Mixon. I'm content manager here at Blumira. Today we'll be talking about the benefits of SIEM that extend beyond security. I know that security information and event management platform, for those of you who don't know, has traditionally been thought of as a security tool, and it certainly is. There are certainly a lot of security benefits that you can reap from a SIEM, but there are also some untapped benefits that you might want to consider as a C-level, or whether you're just thinking about purchasing a SIEM or you have a SIEM already. You should be aware of the benefits beyond security that a SIEM can deliver to your organization. We'll be talking about that today. And here with us, we've got Nato Riley, who is an integrations engineer at Blumira. Nato, thank you so much for hopping on last minute. We really appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. And we've got Jake Crumley, a principal and co-founder of Omniseas. Jake, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, no problem. Happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about what you do at Omniseas, just so we have some perspective there.
Yeah, so at Omniseas, we try to be a one-stop shop for security. We have some MDR services where we utilize tools like SIEMs, like Blumira, all the way to some consulting aspects. So different compliance things such as PCI, we can kind of help you guys out with the audits. We can do some security, posture, consulting, different things such as that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to hear your perspective and hear a little bit more about Omniseas at the end as well. And just for some housekeeping things, we're going to have a Q&A at the end, but feel free to put in your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll get to those when we can. For the past couple of webinars, we've had some issues with our chat box. I'm curious as to whether that's working for you folks today. So maybe if one of you could test it out, that would be great, just so we can figure out whether it's working today or not. Zoom has been a little finicky. But if it doesn't work, just feel free to use the Q&A box. That's how we've worked around it in the past. Well, so it's looking like someone's chat is disabled. We're apologizing for that inconvenience. And as we said, Q&A box can be the best way to work around that. All right, so let us get started. So the cost of traditional SIEM. SIEM is traditionally looked at as a cost center for a lot of organizations, and traditional SIEM can certainly be that way. Nato, I know that you've worked with a lot of SIEMs in the past besides Blumira. Do you want to talk to your experience of potentially paying for that and dealing with all those hidden costs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to outline, when we talk about conventional SIEMs, usually there's a large team, it's a big operation, maybe it's for like a bank or a hospital. And when there are bigger organizations and they have resources to, hire someone who's going to cost $150,000 for one analyst when they need probably up to 20, then it starts to add up after a while. It can be very time consuming, and then time is money too, especially when you're paying people on a salaried basis. And so then when there are certain tasks that take like 2 months to do with other SIEM solutions versus, when you're a small team or you have a lot going on, or running managed service providers, and you're not some massive enterprise team with huge development power, it's very helpful when you can pretty much just have something that works the same day that you get the SIEM getting started to go. You don't have to spend 2 months to get everything up and running.
Absolutely. Jake, have you had any experience with SIEMs that are, maybe targeted towards the larger enterprises, have been more complex to set up, or what has your experience been with the cost of SIEM in general?
Yeah, kind of based off what Nana said, you have a specialized group of people you're hiring to come in and do that. And let's say you have a smaller security team, you have one person who you've trained on your SIM. That person kind of becomes a single point of failure. If they move on, take a different job opportunity, or just decide to part ways with the company, you're looking at bringing someone else on board, bring them up to training within 6 months, and you're going to take 6 months to where you're not really moving your product forward. You're standing still and standing stagnant. Whereas different services like Blumera, for instance, they kind of have that constant development. You don't have to worry about a single person leaving your company.
Yep, that's a great point. Yeah, so complex setup, hidden costs, some of those costs that factor in that you don't necessarily know right off the bat, or those log ingestion costs, the support costs, professional services like onboarding, all of those can really add up. And then, as both of you said, the talent aspect of things can be a huge challenge as well, especially with the market that we're dealing with today in the cybersecurity industry. So those are all some ways that people have traditionally looked at SIEM as a cost center, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. You can look at it as a business enabler. There are certainly benefits to SIEM beyond security that can help your organization in terms of productivity, in terms of your customer trust, in terms of a lot of different other components that you might not want to that you might haven't considered in the past. So we'll be talking about some of those benefits here. And I think one of the first steps of transforming that SIEM into a cost center, from a cost center into a business enabler, is identifying your stakeholders and getting on the same page of who will be using my SIEM, but not only that, who will be affected by it. So that's not only security, but it can be IT, it can be finance, and it can go all the way down to your customers. Jake, did you want to talk a little bit about the process of that for you?
Yeah, so at Omniseas, we offer our CISO as a service. A lot of times we'll come in, talk with your executives, your boards, sometimes they're investors. A lot of companies don't realize the stake that they actually have in the security world of this. I mean, most people focus on just the risks and reducing those risks to increase business productivity, different items like that. Also, some more around the lines of relieving risk to open up new revenue sources and incomes. So having different tools like Blumera in place, being able to pull together your different threats towards the company, pull together good security metrics to actually hand out in reporting, is a very powerful tool to have just for those folks alone.
Absolutely. How about you, Nada? What is your perspective on identifying the stakeholders to figure out who will be affected by the SIEM, not only directly but indirectly as well?
So it's one of those things in business that if you're trying to make money, you're going to be dealing with risk, and you have to decide like what risks are you willing to take, which ones are you willing to manage or deal with, and depending on what you're trying to manage or mitigate, whether it's employee burnout or different things, people at the C level need to have a general holistic idea of the total health of their company. How is everyone doing? You can get general ideas of what's going on at the C level, which then if you're trying to make financial decisions that help the business know like, hey, maybe we could make some adjustments around these things. There are so many different ways that you can make more informed decisions when you have a much clearer understanding of, okay, well, we understand that we have to take on risk as a company, but how can we make that risk be something that we can work around more seamlessly without even taking up as much overhead or time?
Yeah, and that risk component of things is maybe where the legal team, for example, would get involved in a SIEM use case. So it definitely goes beyond security and just IT. Taking a look at like finance, for example, Jake, what would some of the use cases be for finance that you could think of?
So not only do you have different compliance standards that finance is going to have to follow, that you guys can kind of keep that logging, those security logs related to those. You're also going to have different aspects of, reducing downtime, of course, is going to be a financial impact. So finding incidents, solving them sooner, really reduces that financial impact there when it all kind of adds up in the end.
Yeah, that's a great point. Something we'll be talking to later as well. So thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, it seems like the most important point here is to identify who the SIEM affects, not just your security team, so that you have an holistic view of your organization and that you can move forward from there and understand what the best use cases are for those stakeholders. And that's what we will be talking about here. Just move this. So besides security, what will your SIEM be used for? That's a great question to ask before you purchase a SIEM. And even if you have purchased one already, it's still one to keep thinking about if you haven't thought about that beforehand. You talked a little bit to me about the approach that some companies take of like, well, it's just what I was told to do. Why is that so problematic from your perspective?
So that is such a common thing. You get folks who, oh, well, an auditor said I need this, or someone said that I need this, or some compliance checkbox said that I need this. But if you're paying money for anything, there are usually other reasons why a solution exists, and SIEM solutions are no different, where if you are looking to bring in something like a SIEM, if you know what your use cases are, you can get more coverage out of, maybe you use your SIEM for more than just compliance. Maybe you use it to also help establish better customer trust. There's always that scenario of you don't want to be the individual or the company where customers found out that they've been breached and they're the ones telling you that something's going on with their data and what's going on. It's better to be the one who can be in control of that. And so you can establish better authority when you have that confidence of, what's going on with your customers' data. You can speak more authoritatively or with more authority rather, when you're trying to let people know, like, we know what's going on with your data. And you can get a better idea of what's going on with things like, are people working on weekends when they shouldn't be, when you're trying to make sure that, like, burnout, if that's a common theme across your company and something that's been wildly destructive, you can kind of identify like what kinds of departments are suffering from some of these use cases. So maybe if you know other use cases that go beyond, because we're human first, right? And so a SIEM is to identify some things that maybe we as people and teams can adjust or modify or change. And information and knowledge is power, especially if it's knowledge about things that we are already doing, that maybe we can now use that as a tool to empower us to navigate for, making better decisions for our company. And if we think about the use cases that we might apply for SIEM, then you're going to get a lot more out of than just simply using it to meet checkboxes. It can actually become something that will help improve your team dynamics, help drive up other things in your company, and improve other programs.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jake, when you work with customers as Omniseas, what are some of the things that you're asking them or you're walking them through while they're considering a SIEM purchase?
Yeah, so most of the time we're walking through, what are your compliance needs? That's where we start. That's kind of always the first step. What are your compliance needs? What are you required to do? What's your employee front look like? How many employees do you have? How are you managing some of their aspects? How many computers do you have? Where are you putting all your logs together? We're trying to get an idea of, what's their footprint? What's their size here? How many hours are they actually spending on, going through and doing some monitoring practices that are just really hard to maintain with a small security team. I mean, you're going to get burnout there. You're going to get different aspects of people doing things different ways. When you have a unified security product such as a SIEM, it kind of increases the work life of the IT team.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So just not only for security, but taking all of the processes that are currently in your organization and kind of amping those up and getting more productivity from that. It seems like both of you are talking to that general theme as well. So these are just some of the use cases here on this slide that we'll talk to later on in this webinar: compliance, employee visibility, customer trust. Those are just a couple of the use cases that we'll talk about. And we'll dive into the first one here. And this is a use case that Jake here has a lot of experience with, is compliance, specifically PCI compliance. Do you want to talk to that, Jake, a little bit about, what your experience has been there?
Yeah, so as Erica pointed out, honestly, I'm a little bit of a compliance nerd there. I love a lot of the different aspects for that, going through with the frameworks, making sure it aligns to your security posture. But really, one of the biggest things for those of you who may not be familiar with, PCI, or payment card industry, has what's called the DSS, the data security standards. It's basically a list of all these different compliance requirements that you need to be able to handle what's called cardholder data, or credit card information. So one of the major risks of being out of compliance is you may face fines, penalties, fees, and liability for fraudulent card charges. I mean, there's even companies out there who have lost the ability to process credit cards altogether and had that taken away from them. So in that big list of PCI documentation, there's 12 sections. If you want to break it down to, hey, where's the SIEM going to help you best at without reading through that entire thing right now, just know most of section 10 relates on monitoring access to network resources, different items like that. And just kind of know that Blumera as a product will help you with most of those items of monitoring the different log resources, bringing that data together, even to the fact of storing that data. So the DSS in section 10.5, I believe, if you want to get really granular into it, they require that you have at least a year of storage saved of your security logs, and then a certain, I believe it's 3 months of it hot and active, ready to go. Blumera is a great product for it, and I've used it with many auditors for the fact of they retain that data, they have it ready to go in hot storage. It's all there, it's simple. I have only had auditors say fantastic things when we kind of run them through that product. Along other lines of things you'll see a few different HIPAA requirements where Blumera checks the same box. I think Erica's going to be throwing some things in the chat here for links and articles on those that Blumera's kind of taken. They've pinned out, hey, this is where we best hit this product and this security compliance control. For another item that is kind of not really thought about as compliance, but is your cybersecurity policies. A lot of the companies now are looking to get cybersecurity policies. You see all these events in the news, you hear about all these things happen. And in the past 2 years or so now, we've seen an increase in the rates for cybersecurity insurance, unseen of all the way from 50% to 126% rate increases. Alongside that, what people aren't really talking about are the actual denials for the policy. Companies, insurance companies are outright just denying people their applications. In the past, insurance providers, they kind of were over-insuring. Cybersecurity threats weren't as big. They were a thing, but not too many people are going for the policies. They were writing high amounts. Well, now that we started to see more companies claim those, the insurance companies are kind of taking a closer look at things. They're making sure that you're doing your due diligence. As the company applying for the policy, you should be doing a little due diligence with your security beforehand and kind of only using that insurance as a last remediation risk, a last remediation point for that risk. And one of the most common things we're seeing now, the questionnaires have on it, do you have a SIEM? What's your log collection like? What's your alert frequencies look like? Those things are being asked by those companies, and it's not only a great tool to have, but it also helps you check those boxes as well.
Those are great points. Thanks for talking through that, Jake. And Nato, you had talked to me a little bit before about what the repercussions can be, the aftermath of non-compliance. What has that been like in your experience? Have you worked with any organizations that haven't been compliant and have had to deal with that aftermath?
Yeah, so I come from like a history of like working with like law firms and different organizations of that nature. And so, dealing with like lots of like breaches. And so then when that's your like routine job and you're just kind of there all the time, common themes that you run into is oftentimes if there are like employee violations and things along those lines that say like an employee expresses that they're Office of Civil Rights resources or HIPAA resources otherwise. If there's something that's found that's in violation of someone's PII in terms of like maybe someone has some neurodiversity going on and then there's been some careless talk about that across the office when that was something that was kept just between someone in HR, that's private information where now then that actually can be an Office of Civil Rights situation. But if the thing to blame is not talk, but maybe security systems or a lack of security systems or compliance in place where maybe companies don't even know where PII is stored, and then that ends up in the Office of Civil Rights and things like that, then, those kinds of violations can be more than just financial, where someone in the company could be looking at some jail time, things of that nature, even if there was no criminal intent, just from being like negligible, because it's you're responsible for those things whether you know that you are or not. There are some of those things that you can have charges pressed on you just because you should have known. And if you're running a company, there's certain things that we have to be responsible for.
Yeah, that's certainly scary stuff to think about as a business owner or at the C-level, facing those sort of not only fines, but legal repercussions as well. Did either one of you want to talk through anything else on this slide about PCI compliance, about any other sort of compliance frameworks? It looks like just from the poll that we've launched, a lot of organizations that are on the webinar here today work with PCI DSS, a lot work with NIST, but there's definitely a lot of compliance like all of the compliance frameworks are, that box is checked throughout the board. So if you want to take a look at how Blumira helps with your specific compliance framework, feel free to check out that link that I put in the chat. We do have pretty robust documentation on each of those compliance frameworks that were mentioned here today. So definitely check those out, excuse me, and see how Blumira can help with your organization.
Blumira makes it fast to get started. Other solutions can be very slow.
I've used Blumira as both now reselling and as a customer in the past since I first met them, and the compliance aspects of it makes it so much easier. Everything's there in a single pane of glass. So for example, for I believe it's 10.6, you have some items in there that, hey, daily you have to review your security logs for different events, different anomalies. It's really easy when all your logs are in one place, one pane of glass, one reporting feature tied to it.
To that point, because I built out with other SIM solutions as well. So it's not just Blumira that I've been doing engineering internally with. It's one of those things that if you need case management or you're doing incident response for, say, like a compliance situation or breach or scenario, Blumira already has all of the finding information organized for the auditor, for whoever's working with an auditor, kind of like what Jake's talking about. Is they're going to want to see that finding information there. They're going to want to see it organized. And if it's not already organized, then you have to do all of that. And with Blumira, it's already, a lot of that is already done for you. So you can just get going with it, even in the event of an incident.
Yeah, it makes a great logbook for that. When you have an event come up, the workflows in it, walk your employees through what to do. In our case, we have a security operations center set up where our folks can go through, do all that for you, leave that logbook in there. So when you're going through the time of your audit, you can see what we've been doing. You can see our responses to the different events. It's just that wonderful binder. You can kind of hand them at the end of the day and be like, yes, this is the due diligence we've been doing for, I believe it's section 12 is the response to incidents such as that.
Those are great points, Jake and NATO. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that stacked evidence that Blumira provides, that logbook that you both were talking about, how beneficial that is, how that plays into an incident response perspective as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Let's move on to the next use case. We'll be talking about employee visibility. So, the past, 3 years now with COVID, it feels like it's been a while, I guess. But since COVID, since that remote workforce trend started to really take off, it can be really challenging to keep track of where your workforce is at all times, what they're doing. And depending on what kind of organization you are, what sort of requirements you have, that is sometimes a necessary thing to keep track of. And HR and employee visibility isn't necessarily something that you think about immediately when you think about a SIM, but it's surprisingly one of the use cases that a lot of our Blumira customers will ask for is, hey, HR is requesting employee information, for example. I need that from Blumira. Nato, do you have any insight on that as to like any experience with working with customers or working with those sort of use cases of figuring out whether, you had talked earlier about, are people working too much? How would you use a SIM to figure that out?
So there's some really handy things that you can do with a SIM solution. And if we go all the way over to thinking about tools like Office 365 or the Google Suite, uh, a lot of companies use that for the primary, like, how do we run our company? Where does your email come from? Is it, Google? Is it Office 365? Especially companies like that, if you want a fast way to figure out, like, okay, so we have employees all around the world. Maybe there's some people in some different states. Maybe there's someone who just took another trip to some other country and they're still working over there. Who knows who's where? When you have remote workers, you just know that you need to make sure that they're safe, and that, if they connect to like a hotel or something along those lines and click like a phishing link, that's not going to just like cause problems for your entire company. So when you have all these people in all these different locations, and maybe they are logging in on weekends, when people work from home, one of the challenges with the remote workers is they'll be logging in at midnight, they'll be logging in at 3 a.m., they'll be logging in on a Saturday night. So it's not just security when we start getting into like, okay, so what all is this visibility that we're looking for when we can track like Google and people's email logins and things like that. You don't even have to, it can be kept private. If you're saying that there's like, you have a team of maybe 50 people and 10 are logging in over the weekend, that's a culture problem. There's something that maybe that leads to a conversation with management, and where you'd be like, okay, well, what can we do to help discourage people from like giving up their, because then you end up with too much burnout across a company. It's going to hit your bottom line. It's going to hit your turnover like a truck. You're going to run into all these things. And so there's some people who say, oh, it's impossible to manage remote workers. It's not impossible to manage remote workers if you pay attention to them. And that can be one starting point that can make a huge impact, just that one thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And to your point about different logins from different locations, Jake, I know that you would want to talk about out of the country authentications. And you've used Blumera before, so the impossible travel detection that we have. What has been your experience with that?
Yeah, so Blumera is a great product for, detecting I believe they even have it for Okta too. So it does Microsoft logins and Okta ones, I believe. But detecting employees outside the country doing log on, well, that can be just fine, but still you get people logging in during their vacations. You get people traveling, for work, being able to make sure, they are where they are. Hey, we see them here, those different kind of things. But what is kind of commonly unthought about now, so MFA has really been fantastic for the security industry. Having that multi-factor authentication really helps, take that risk away of just username and password. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, people are still people. Many different pen testing firms have seen when you're doing a password spraying attack where you're just sitting there spamming logins and people are getting prompted for MFA, you still got a lot of users, even though that they haven't logged into something, they're getting that MFA alert on their phone, they're still clicking OK to it just to get it to go away. And the next thing you know, you have someone in Russia who's now logged in as one of your employees. Having a SIEM allows you to find those gaps in kind of your human policy. So we can make policy and put together PDFs and send it out all day long, telling people not to just click that. They still may. We can also send out policies all day long about, password files. Deborah in accounting, she's great at her job, fantastic at accounting, but she can't always remember passwords, and she has an Excel sheet of them on her desktop. Blumera can help you find different things like that, different violations of your policy, just to kind of help ensure that you're doing what you say you're doing. When you hand over an auditor saying, hey, this is our employee policy, they go, how do you make sure that you're enforcing that? Well, we have these reports in Blumera that show we say don't put password files on your desk, and then we check it here and we have alerts coming in this way.
Yeah.
Another quick aspect I just kind of wanted to point out when we're in sort of the employee visibility world of it and other stakeholders is the help desk team can also use your SIEM quite a bit too. In the past, I've worked at a company where we had Blumera set up, and the SIEM was actually really helpful to the help desk folks. We would have things, how many people here have had where there's an account lockout where all of a sudden an account's locking out because we just changed the password? Well, somewhere in your wide network, there's credentials saved, and they're the wrong credentials. Now you've changed the password and it's continuously locking up the account. Having a SIEM where you're bringing all those logs in really helps you to isolate that station, figure out which one it is in that sea of data, and find it and react to it. The help desk team absolutely loves that. Instead of going through computer by computer, it's the easiest way to kind of go about it. And then also you can use this proactively to support your users. Blumera is a great report and a great little thing right under security overview that has the recent security lockouts. The help desk team can proactively see, all right, this person's getting locked out. Why don't we reach out to them, help them reset their password, help them have a smooth user experience?
Yeah, that's a great point. And Nato, you had talked through another use case before as well, the accidental changes in files that can, help IT as well. Did you want to explain what you meant by that?
Oh yeah. So anyone who's worked with, because I come from some of my history for why I've worked with so many different kinds of. So I come from like a MSP background. I've worked with different law firms. I've worked with like legal offices of various sorts, and then I've worked with like SIM vendors as well, and then their professional services. And so you see a lot of things. And one of the most common things that you see, especially with companies who are probably working with a lot of data entry, if they have like a lot of spreadsheets, you see it in legal offices, you see it in like accounting offices, if there's like a firm especially, where people make accidental changes to important forms. And in some cases it might be important evidence, whether it's like by accident or on purpose, usually almost always like by accident, but there's situations that people do things on purpose too. But there are so many just like oopsies, like someone just accidentally deleted a really important document and they're like, oh no, I need that restored, so that you can have someone quickly go and restore the file. Where with like Blumera, you can figure out, okay, well, what file are we looking for? You can go restore that exact file, or you can have monitors. You can have monitoring for file systems so that you can say, I just want to make sure that this directory here is getting monitored. So if something happens to this particular directory, then we're going to set up an auto restore, something that requires some engineering of the company themselves. But how can you start doing those things without the visibility first, or without something that can spot like, oh, these files, if they get deleted, or if something strange happens, or someone accidentally makes a big change and deletes 50 rows on a really important spreadsheet, there's ways to solve those things and spot them without it becoming a bigger problem.
Absolutely. Thanks for explaining that, Nato. All right, let's move on to our next use case. And before we do, I just wanted to point out that it looks like 62% of the attendees here do support BYOD rather. So BYOD can certainly create complications for your employee visibility, which Blumera and other SIMs can certainly help with. So good points all around. Let's talk about customer trust. So I'm sure we've all seen the headlines where, another organization has been breached, and maybe the organization didn't realize that they had been breached until an attacker was in their environment for months or even years. And that certainly doesn't look good from a customer perspective, and can certainly hinder potential customers from wanting to work with you. Have the stat here, 60% of consumers would avoid purchasing from a business that suffered just one cyber attack in the past year. Pretty harsh, but certainly can affect your customers trusting in you as an organization, as you protect their the sensitive data that you might have. What is the best way to use a SIM in order to gain that customer trust? Jake, do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, so kind of just how you pointed out, one of the main things now that everyone's talking about are supply chain risks. It all really heavily started hitting home when you had things like SolarWinds, things like Kaseya, where these tools that everyone relied on, part of your supply chain, were being compromised. In the case of Kaseya, it was pushing out ransomware to its customers. You don't want to become that risk in the supply chain. So what can you kind of do to be proactive on that? Start pulling all your logs together, start looking for anomalies, finding it and stopping it sooner. You'll even nowadays you'll see different things. I want to say I get a couple of them a week just in our position of, hey, you're going to be bringing in cybersecurity tools for us. Can you please fill out our supply chain risk form? What proactions have you taken? A lot of your customers be giving those to you, or you may be asking your vendors for those. And most times there's a box on there, do you have log collection? Do you have a SIEM? Do you analyze the events and look for anomalies? So having a product like Blumera is fantastic for that.
Absolutely. And it looks like, I did launch a poll just a few moments ago, so we'll still give some people time to reply there, but it looks like a good majority, 57% right now, do store sensitive customer information. And having a SIM is certainly a way around that, right? Nato, do you want to talk a little bit about our log storage policies here at Blumera?
Yeah, so in terms of log storage policies, it's all written down, but I think one of the more important things is that you can talk to us to ask for adjustments on whatever retention needs or requirements that you have. So like if it is for like PCI and you need to make sure that you're meeting like 1 year's retention policies, or if you have something else. For those who are trying to figure out, well, how do we manage figuring out, how long do we keep data, or how would we know that? Usually I start with the strictest compliance first. And if, say, the strictest compliance says that you need this much retention, then that's something that you have in your policies. You can bring that over to us, and then we can kind of help make sure that you don't have to worry about the disaster recovery aspects of that data and structuring it so that it's secure and safe and being handled in a way that's going to, it's almost like hiring a whole bunch of people in a lot of ways, because that's a lot of work otherwise. It's still going to cost money, but it's still cheaper than hiring a whole bunch of people.
And then one of the things that I think is really important too is the fact that we don't allow attackers to make, or anyone really, to make changes to those log files. So for data integrity, we make sure that those logs haven't been tampered with, because we periodically review those internally. So that also, and we also provide alerts for like file integrity monitoring changes as well. So that can be a huge help for organizations that are storing sensitive customer information within their own environment, to just be able to offload that to an environment that's not their own. That's a lot of liability from a business perspective.
And then, of course, as Nato said earlier, you don't want your customers coming to you and saying, hey, I found this. You want to be able to be the proactive one here if anything ever does occur, stopping it early, getting all the details and reporting it, rather than a customer coming forward, hey, I found this, and then them also going to the news and being like, hey, I found this and this happened. Really being the one to be in control of it, know all the situation, and release that information is very helpful.
Absolutely.
It's so true. And we see some extremes too. I guess like at a high level, if we think about what's the risk of not getting that base visibility, like even just for the sake of your customers, like TJ Maxx is the one that always comes to mind for me. Is like, we hear about all these other really big breaches, and there's some more recent ones. And Equifax, that was a big event and all, but TJ Maxx, there was someone in that environment for like 7 years. And to think that like your customer data is being farmed for that long, and then to find out that this is what's going on with your customer data, you don't want that to be your customers who told you that. That's not a good thing. That's not a good look. Yeah,
like Target, for example. Everyone here's probably shopped at Target. They had their breach. The criminals actually got in through the HVAC unit, the computers that controlled the coolers and everything. There's a wide range of people, and it does get out there when there is a breach. And knowing ahead of time, stopping and controlling the story is something that's going to help your company greatly.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great points. So, and also just the ability to detect those ransomware activities and threats against your users. That's a huge way to build customer trust, is that if you prevent a ransomware attack, that's protecting your customers, and can certainly, be a good look for you as a business. So let's talk to the financial savings component. We had talked a little bit earlier on about how a SIM or a SIEM might benefit the finance department. And that's something that we've talked a little bit about in previous webinars, but something that not a lot of people necessarily think about is the cost benefits of SIEM. You know, as I said, a lot of people look at it as a cost center, but for a lot of you know, use cases, a SIEM can offload the cost of a SIEM can like really offload the cost of other things. Like for example, IR, cyber insurance. A lot of cyber insurance providers are, you know, offering discounts if you have a SIEM in place, and that can offset the cost of cyber insurance itself, or the SIEM itself rather. IR is kind of one that we had talked through here with both Nato and Jake. And I wanted to bring it up here today. How does a SIEM make your IR team? How does that really make their life easier from an IR perspective?
Yeah, I believe we talked about this one a little bit earlier, like you said. So first off, it's kind of a question for everyone. Have you ever calculated what it would cost to have an hour of downtime and what that cost is to you? So we have a varying array of customers at Omniseas. A few of them are some heavy infrastructure customers where if they're down 6 hours and the IR team comes in and it's going to take them another 6 hours to dig through all these fragmented logs, piece the story together to be able to, you know, patch that and bring the business back up. For a few of our customers, that's 6 hours of extra downtime from the IR team coming in. That pays for their Blumera subscription a couple times over. So that lost revenue from, you know, that incident response team coming in, not having all the information that they need, it really adds up. Now, let's say you have Blumera in, you still have an event where something happens, the incident response team comes in, all of a sudden they have a history of everything that happened. They can react quickly, they can put the pieces together. You know, you've seen the detective things where they have all the logs up on the wall and they have string connecting to all of them. I mean, imagine trying to do that if you only have like 2 newspapers. If you're an IR team, having all that information is going to really increase your response time, increase the ability that you'd have to contain this and figure out what happened.
Mm-hmm.
All of that stuff is so important too, because I think if anyone's ever worked in incident response, you run into a situation where you have to keep all of your case management well organized. And there are a lot of case management solutions out there. And if you're working with a SIEM that doesn't already have case management included, or something that'll at least allow case management to some form, then you have to have your SIEM, you have to have your case management tool, then you have to get the logs over to the case management tool, and then you have to make sure that your people are updating all the tools appropriately. And then, you know, if someone quits, then that's a whole training cycle to like get this person, you know, up to like, how do we do our case management here? With Blumera, it's a one-stop shop for a lot of things, where if you have an incident, boom, there's the finding. You open the finding, you can manage the case right there inside the finding, and then you can add relevant attachments that maybe are going to be shared across the team. So if you're going to add like some additional logs that are associated with something, it can all be shared right there in one place, and you don't have to have like a dedicated separate case management tool unless you needed one for something, or needed the granularity of something specific. But it does present that one-stop shop for incident responders, and time is money. So it's, you know, the longer things take, all that little tiny data entry, I think that it's easy to miss how much data entry is done in the incident response space, and people are getting paid by the hour half the time. And so like all that manual data entry, like you can pay for that too. And it's just someone just copy pasting some things back and forth that, you know, or trying to find some files. And it's just like Jake said, it's a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, also along that side, so we're talking about, you know, financial impacts here. So after you've gone through and you've calculated that time, you know, let's start talking security metrics, because you want to bring this to your C-level executive, or your C-level executive, and you're looking to bring this to your board of, you know, how's this going to save money? You know, one of the big things is security metrics and reporting. If you go to them right now, I'm pretty sure everyone has a firewall, and that firewall has how much traffic you've blocked. You can't take that metric to them and go, we've blocked this much traffic. That clearly means that it's saved this much money. It's really hard to kind of draw that line. I'm pretty sure all of you have used the phrase before. It's not if you will get breached, but when. Well, when you say that phrase, it's kind of one of those why would I give you money for security if you're just going to breach anyways? The metric that you want to pay, the metric you want to put together and the picture you want to paint is, hey, we found these incidents. This was our response time on these incidents. These are the actions we took. This is how much time and money we saved by finding this early, getting to it, and reacting to it. That money that you invested in us for the SIEM correlated in us having these fast reaction times. So now you're giving the board reports every 6 months. And instead of we blocked this many events, okay, that doesn't make us money. We start saying we brought our incident response time down from 5 minutes to 2 minutes to 1 minute to now we're doing automation and operation, different automation and different tools for security response. It kind of helps you paint a better, more secure picture rather than just, hey, we had this many automated blocks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure as an MSP, that certainly helps you with your customers as well, is proving that value.
Oh yes, that value is something really big, and especially having the security operations center, being able to show our customers that slowly ticking down where we're going from, a 15-minute response to a 10-minute response to a 5-minute response, introducing automation to just kind of have those items go faster and faster. Blumera has a lot of information within it, a lot of reports you can run, and you can start getting security metrics, help you paint that story to get your budget that you need in order to have a secure environment.
Yeah, those are really great tips, Jake. And financial savings ties into a lot of different things that we've talked about today and things that we haven't touched upon yet, like log ingestion and the cost of storage. Paying for that from a traditional SIEM vendor where they're tacking that on, that can really offset your costs in a negative way. And just having that already included can certainly help with cost savings as well. And then we talked a little bit through the offsetting cyber insurance fees and offsetting the cost of a customer breach. So there's definitely a lot of ways that having a SIEM can benefit you from a cost perspective. So that's kind of how you can transition your thinking from thinking about it from a cost center to, like we had said before, more of a business enabler. And it looks like most of our attendees here have not calculated what the cost would be for an hour of downtime. What would be some tips that you would have for those folks, either Jake or Nato? Any ways to more easily calculate that cost, or is it a kind of a longer process that would need to be taken?
Nato, you want to go first, and then I'll follow up?
Sure. So I guess I think about it less in terms of trying to calculate the exact cost per hour of a certain task, because I'll put it this way: if we calculate a cost per hour of time savings in that way, if someone's not doing something, and then we could say that well, that hour did not incur a loss. But the other thing is, when someone doesn't lose an hour to one task, that hour can go somewhere else. And so where then that hour gets redirected is another story. And then it depends on what's the return value on other tasks. So if people are spending their time on data entry is generally not a task that's going to be a massive revenue driver, because data entry can oftentimes be automated. And then maybe automation would be a more valuable task than data entry from a long-term return standpoint. And so I look at SIEM in terms of adding to your automations so that you have these things giving people time back to push that time back into more revenue driving activities, where it could be more development focused or focused toward more business development or whatever, more customer support. So whatever there's less of opens doors for more of, and then that becomes up to, what benefits your business, more of what.
So this is also something really great to, bring the rest of your business in on board. This is something you can go sit down with whether you have your president or your CFO and kind of ask them, hey, we're looking to calculate what is cyber risk actually costing us? How much is an hour of our business time together? Any CFO or anyone who has everything together should be able to kind of help enlighten you or give you an idea of where to go with that. If not, just, kind of start taking the, how much the business makes each year, and then just divide that down by the hourly rates for it. If you only go 8 hours a day, divide that by it. That'll get you close enough in the ballpark. There are many different math equations you can use and get real into it. But honestly, I would use it as a time to go sit down with your financial team, build that relationship, build that rapport, and just find out, how much is the risk, paint that risk out for them when they go, oh, an hour of downtime is going to cost us $50,000. Why do you ask? Well, the average recovery time for this event here is 6 hours. All of a sudden, they're seeing that merit behind that. And it honestly gives you a good time to go sit down, talk with them, help them understand why you're actually looking at these products and what you're trying to calculate. It also shows that you're kind of doing the due diligence with the money. You're not just spending and buying the coolest, flashiest tools. You're sitting down, you're figuring out, all right, how do I reduce this risk? You're kind of speaking their language at that point, and you're able to tie in our language here in security with theirs in finance a little bit.
That's a great point, Jake, and certainly a really great ability to have is to talk both languages of finance, of security, of IT. That's certainly a really useful skill that you should have as a practitioner and as a C-level. Awesome. So I think we've gone through, excuse me, all of the use cases that we wanted to talk about here today. But I did have up a poll asking if you wanted to talk more with either Blumira or with Omniseas. So feel free to just vote in that poll, and someone will get back to you, and we'll chat through your needs. If you want to talk a little bit more, learn a little bit more about Blumira, a really easy way of going about that is signing up for our free edition. We have a free edition that you don't have to enter a credit card, you don't have to talk to a salesperson, you just enter your information, and you can use our cloud connector to get set up really, really quickly and start detecting Microsoft 365 threats for free. Really easy way to get started and see what the Blumira platform is like live and in your environment. And you can do that by going to blumira.com/free. I'll type that here in the chat as well. Blumira is designed for smaller teams. So we're really dedicated towards making SIEM easier for those smaller teams that don't necessarily have a lot of resources. So we do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, whether it's parsing, whether it's rule configuration, deploying those detection rules. A lot of that heavy lifting is already done for you with Blumira. So it really takes a lot less time to really see the value of Blumira and be able to prove that in your organization. Jake, I know that you have some experience with using Blumira as a customer and as an MSP, so I'd love to hear a little bit about that, what Blumira has been able to do for you.
Yeah, so as I've kind of been harping on through this entire thing, Blumira's made, when I worked at a company where we had Blumira, it made our compliance so much easier. One of the reasons I love it as an MSP though is that the setup's mostly the same for all customers. It's going to be the same rule sets. Everyone gets the same benefits. We're not, starting from ground up, building out custom things. Everyone gets that good package that the guys work on at Blumira to just constantly develop, constantly bring to that newer state, introduce all those technologies. As MSP, I don't have to have 40 engineers working on 20 different clients to build us. No, we can have a smaller team of engineers here, we can work with the Blumira team, and then work with you to make it fit. It's honestly a fantastic product. That's one of the reasons I choose to resell it and help out those guys.
Awesome. Well, we love to hear that, Jake. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about Omniseas and what you do as an MSP.
Yeah, so Omniseas, first off and foremost, we really started out in the Security Operations Center, Network Operations Center, MDR, managed detection and response market. One of the things that we kind of do to separate ourselves from most is instead of just focusing on security, we'll also monitor other items for you and work with the customer for that. Vast majority of our customers are going to be infrastructure things, tolling, port authorities, different utilities, municipalities. That's where we're trying to, get in the market and specialize. A lot of the times you need a tool to monitor those environments and you need a team to do it. And then you have a whole separate team for your security and that. It's really hard to get funding for both. One of them eventually hits the floor. So at Omniseas, we try to bring those services together so you can still get both the needs. You're not spending unnecessary money. You're not having two teams. Should make it a little bit easier for you guys to manage, get the funding for that. One of the other things that we do, if you're not interested in that, it's just fine. We'll still help you with your security posture through different means of, a few different compliance regulations, some security audits, even just some general CISO as a service. If you guys need help designing a plan for your security initiatives for your department, we can even come in as something as simple as that. So it's really, you choose what size you want. Do you just need a little bit of help here, a little bit of help there? Are you a CEO right now who's like, man, I don't even want to handle any security, I just want to push it off to someone else? We can take that on and we can do it. So our whole business model is kind of that flexibility and, really kind of bringing that human interaction back into it. You see a lot of companies going towards automation now. We love automation. We love automated tools. Unfortunately, attackers are still human. They still think like a human. You do need that human intellect behind it. And that's kind of what our security operation team, our engineers, and our auditors all bring to the table. That's all I really got for Omniseas. I'd love to hear from you guys. I think Erica said she sent out that box. If you would like to talk with us, definitely check it there and we'll be in touch.
Great. Does Omniseas have a website or anything that anyone can check out?
Yes, they do. And I'm ashamed it is not here on this slide. It's just omniseas.com. You guys can head over there. We are doing an update on it here soon, so don't worry, but that'll have a contact us and how to get a hold of us. And we're happy to talk.
Great. Well, it was great to learn a little bit more about Omniseas and great to hear your perspective working with Blumera as well, Jake. So thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining. We did get a few questions. It looks like they're all a lot of them are from the same person. Mike, someone's going to reach out to you and we'll make sure that all of your questions get answered. I know that you had some specific needs and we definitely would like to talk those through with you. So I'll have a technical person reach out to you and make sure that those questions get answered for you. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you learned something from this webinar, and we hope that you had a little bit of fun along the way. So feel free to follow along with our future webinars. We always have at least a couple of webinars a month, always about a new topic. So feel free to follow along. Jake, Nato, once again, thank you so much for joining and sharing your insight here. This has been extremely helpful and we really appreciate it. I think I learned a lot and hopefully our attendees did as well.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Jake.
Yeah, thanks for having me, you guys.
All right. Thanks again. I hope everyone has a great rest of